Welcome to our second to last meeting of the learning sessions for the internship program. So congratulations to everyone for making it this far. So the next meeting will be pretty discussion based. We'll do some breakout rooms and just kind of talk about a recap of the season. And then I do have, last week we went over the survey, but I'll have like a live document that we'll be working on throughout the class, just sharing some of our thoughts and things since it is the last meeting. But for those of you who are staying on, who still have markets you're going to be attending, I want to take this time before we get into tonight's topic to find a time that we could check in weekly. And what I'm thinking is I'll come up with a vague theme and then maybe a discussion question. It will be probably like a 20-minute meeting, mostly just to have a chance to check in with everyone if anything comes up. So those of you who are staying on for a couple weeks or for the next month, do you want to keep it at this time, or would you prefer to move it? We could do it like over the lunch hour if that's easy, or during the day, or another weeknight. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
For me, Felicity, because of my work schedule, it might not be the same day every week. I hope that's not too inconvenient for you, but I might just have to play it by ear with you beforehand, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Any weeknights would be better for me than like during lunch break, because I'm already busy enough.
Does Karen or Kaya, do you have input?
I'm mostly flexible, but this time works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, anything really.
Are you meeting with all of us that are staying on in October at the same time or individually?
It would be everyone at the same time. Okay, so if I keep it at 6 o'clock on Monday nights, is that okay? Or okay. I could also move it up to do like a 5:30 if you want to get it over with faster, or maybe it's easier to remember if we just keep it at the same time. So I will figure out what I'm going to do with the Zoom link, because like this is a reoccurring meeting that ends. So I'll probably be making a new one and sending it out to you guys, but it'll be the same time. I'll schedule the meeting from 6 to 6:30. And I don't necessarily think that we'll always be using that full half hour. And then I will basically have like one discussion question. And when everyone has talked about that a little bit and brought up any other concerns or questions you have, then we'll be good to go. So that is for October. And then, yeah, we talked about the next meeting. You don't have any homework assignments for this week other than to do that wrap-up survey and schedule an exit interview. Although if you're staying on till the end of October, that doesn't necessarily need to be done this week. Okay, so for the exit interview, so some of you guys have a person who's supervising you for the FARRMS internship, and then you also have someone that you work with like day of, another like market staff member that you work closely with. So feel free to invite both of those people to participate. The exit interviews are really a chance for farms to just hear the concerns of farmers markets throughout the state as we kind of design our programming for the future. So if there's someone else that you work with most of the time, I would like to talk to them too. I totally get it if they can't make it, but yeah, like I know sometimes there's someone who's like on the board or the technical manager, and then you have someone that you are really there with a lot of the time. So if it's possible to work it out with another person or even a couple if they're available, that would be great, because like I said, it really is. We have some questions specific to your internship, but most of that I'm going to try and capture in the survey. So this meeting can really cover a lot more broad market related issues. Okay, and that being said, let's move into tonight's topic, which is evaluating your farmer's market. So last week, I asked you guys to do some sort of market evaluation at your market. And I realized I never sent a reminder before the weekend, so I hope you guys remembered to do that. We had the GEL tools for evaluating public spaces, and I just asked you to choose one or two of them to kind of trial at your market. So I'm gonna just ask you guys to talk about your experience doing that. If there was something that didn't work for your market or something that did work, maybe you were looking at your market in a different way or sparked a new question. So I'll just really quickly have you say which activity you did, what you found. If you have results, you are free to share your screen if you have them up. If not, that's okay. And then, yeah, just any struggles or successes that you had with it. Do you prefer if I call on someone specifically? Yeah, let's start with you, Josh. I'm gonna pull up your results here really quickly.
This was admittedly an unusual market just because we had an event going on, like just in the county. Kind of was a wrap up for summer. So we were in a different location and had a lot more people than normal. All right. I did my best to keep things simple. And I decided to keep under 18, so basically kids, just as one number because they're not really, if they're buying something, their parent is buying it for them, not the kid. And I didn't want to have male and female, as you can see by my results, which I screwed up slightly on one of the male groups, but 18 to 30. So basically young college age or newer parents was what I was considering to be that group. We only had 14 girls and no guys from that age. We ended up having 19 guys from the 30 to 45 and a lot more women. 55 was what I was counting. And then for basically grandparents or they were noticeably getting in their years was slightly lower in the female, but males increased. So for my total count, I ended up doing 217, but that was I did my best. And then I just had a imaginary line like to the entrance of the market because we were just an on-shoot of the main event. So if they ever crossed that line, that's what I was counting.
Okay. I like how you didn't count gender under 18. I think that was probably a smart move just because, like, yeah, you're staring at kids trying to, like, maybe that's not the most important thing. Like when you're older, that definitely you're probably targeting different demographics of men and women, but I absolutely agree that just kids could be their own category. And I like that you made that call on your own, in the moment when you realized that it might not be feasible to do that at the market. What would you say was the biggest struggle that you had with this?
Honestly, the hardest part of it for me was my line was really long, like where I was looking at, because it was both sides of the street. Hi, sorry, I didn't realize I never turned on my video. So, anyway, we had a whole street to ourselves basically for the market, but there were some people coming in from one side of the street and others from the opposite angle. And then of course we had some people who were coming in from behind the market. So I was doing my best, but I'd say that was definitely the hardest, was making sure I didn't miss anybody.
Great. All right. Thank you, Josh. Karen, I saw that you emailed me a photo. Would you be willing to go next? I will bring this up on the screen.
It's literally just my rough drawing of what I placed at the market when I was doing it. and it was the age and gender tally of when they moved across a certain line. And I picked that line by the entrance because on our Thursday market, it's been getting smaller and smaller every week. It rained one week, 2 weeks ago. We had 4 vendors. And then last week we had 3 vendors. And then this week there was 5 vendors. So it's getting smaller and smaller and the amount of people coming. So since there were only 2 produce vendors, I put them right in the front. And I wanted to see how many people crossed that line to go see the other vendors that weren't, because they could come in the market and just peek and then leave, or just get produce and leave. So most everybody that came in ended up seeing all the other vendors too. But there was a lot lower numbers and I went for 15 minutes. Like my count at 10 was like 0, but then finally people started coming in again. So it wasn't like huge numbers. It said or till 100. I'm like, we didn't have 100 people all day. So
I like your quick map here. I appreciate that. So what would you do differently if you had to do this again?
do it on our busy day on Saturday, but I wasn't actually there on Saturday because we were butchering chickens at my house this weekend. So
Did you send me any other questions on this one? Did anyone else do the counts at their market?
I did. I can share my screen.
Okay.
So these were just like my final ones. I put in the notes on my phone. So I did the age and gender as well. I did from like 11:50 to noon. I'd say that's kind of like a peak time, I'd say, for the Red River Market. By 12:30, it kind of starts to taper off. So but that was a good time to do it. I mean, I won't read all the numbers, but I think the biggest thing that I wanted to point out was like, so this week, our theme was college day. So marketing, we really tried to push like college students coming into the market, alumni coming into the market. We had college booths. We had NDSU marching band perform. We had student singers come in. And all of us had kind of noted that we're working it, like the demographic really did shift towards the young adult range, which was fun to see. And like earlier in the season, we did Kids Day. So that day, kids numbers were definitely up. We also did a senior day. I don't think that really changed much, but it was good to see that the young adults went up. Red River Market definitely kind of leans female, I would say. And then overall, like the young adult to adult is probably our highest bulk of demographics. So yeah, that was this week.
What would you do differently if you had to do this again?
Yeah, it was hard just because we're so big and there are just so many people that it's hard to like differentiate gender with the age thing when there's just so many people walking past you. So I tried to find like a quieter spot so I could actually go detailed into age and gender. Maybe having like a second person help you like on the other side of the street or something like that. But yeah.
Okay. Are there any of these from when you guys were doing these? Are there any that you would like to do again at your market? Like, or any of the tools that maybe you didn't do in this past market, but you're like, oh, that would be really cool if we measured that in the future?
I think for us, like looking at numbers of animals that come through, because we do have a lot of dogs. The first week we had a couple snakes, cats, but just like measuring actually how many dogs come through, because those are most common. So yeah, we never actually accumulated the numbers. So
Okay.
Two things I wanted to say real quick. One, I knew your market was huge, but good Lord, that was 10 minutes and you had over 200 people. So very impressive, seeing as mine was over 4 hours. But also just curious, did you walk around to see how many you had, or?
So not for that particular one, but when we do custom accounts, I walk around every hour. And like opening day when like, so I had like estimated, I don't even remember, it was like over 1,000 or it was like 1,500. But then like actually we have a technical people counter that just detects movement in and out of the space. And that was over like 10,000. So that was opening day, it was our busiest day, but still like really high numbers that it's hard for me to count just because, you know, it's so big and you're walking around that you always miss a lot of people. But yeah, it's a whole thing downtown nowadays.
Also, how many vendors do you have, or did you have?
On our roster, we have 80 this year. Active, like a week, we do like 55, 60.
If you guys have a chance to go to downtown Fargo, it's definitely worth it. It's super fun. And yeah, it feels like all of town is in downtown. So it's a good energy. Okay, you guys have been doing customer counts throughout the year. And like Kaya said, you have different struggles for different markets depending on how big they are. But that kind of gave you guys a little bit of an intro to data evaluation. But I'm gonna talk a little bit today. You guys won't really be able to implement this in your market this year, but maybe in the future it will be helpful. Just about like choosing the type of data you're gonna collect and being really mindful about what you're gonna do with that data. So for us, for the FARRMS grant, it was through the Agricultural Marketing Service through the USDA. So they always want to know, are you increasing the sales of local foods or agricultural goods in your area? So that's why we did the spending survey and the customer counts, because that really tells us those numbers. But for your market, that might not be what you're looking for. A lot of times markets are looking for like soft data, we call like qualitative data. How do people feel about the market? You know, what is their perception of it? How likely are they to come back? So those sorts of things. So I have a short presentation about evaluating your market and just kind of the types of data so you can get a little familiar with those terms if you haven't before, and then we'll go over some other market evaluation strategies that you can just kind of keep in your mind. So the first thing that you want to ask yourself when you are coming up with some sort of data collection method is what you're trying to accomplish with that data. For you guys, a lot of times that's going to be growing your market. And that could mean a lot of things. Maybe you want more sales at your market. Maybe you want more customers. Maybe you want more vendors, or maybe you just want like more reach in the community. And the questions that you're going to ask to achieve that are going to be a little bit different. So I think it's easiest to literally take a piece of paper and write down, I want to increase sales by 10%, or just give yourself a hard number, or I want to increase the knowledge of the market in like these neighborhoods, you know, something like that. So really write down exactly what you want to do. And then with that is, what is this data going to be used for? And these categories are like not official categories. They are just easy ways to kind of break it up in your head. So is this data gonna be used internally? So only for your board members and your market staff? Is this just gonna be something you keep in the organization to kind of keep a feel of your market, make sure that you are evaluating what's going on? Is this data going to be used for storytelling? So maybe you're going to be using it in social media. Maybe you're going to be using it in advertisements, or to convince vendors to join your market, or to convince small local businesses to partner with you. So to tell a story about your market. And then, is it going to be used for convincing someone or something? So this is like for grants or for reporting. if you can show that money from your market stays in the community, therefore it's helping businesses nearby, that's very convincing to someone who's unsure about like partnering with you. If you have questions, feel free to just ask. I can't see everyone's face when I'm sharing my screen, so feel free to just jump in. So I'll use these terms, qualitative versus quantitative data. Basically, quantitative is hard numbers, qualitative is not. So you want to think about, if you want qualitative data, that's probably testimony from your vendors, interviews or surveys from your vendors or customers or volunteers or anyone involved, or sentiment. So that's like, how connected do you feel to the market? How likely are you to recommend the market to a friend? Those types of questions that really get at your feelings and perception of the market. And that's going to be useful for maybe getting someone to sponsor you or to tell a story. Again, like a business who wants to know what your market is about. Like, why should I partner with you? How do people feel? How does it affect the community? And how is that going to affect my business? And then the other type of data is quantitative. So that's like some of the data that we got for this grant and some of what you guys have been doing. So customer counts. You are like literally counting the number of people. That's a number, and it's very easy to look at. So another thing like that would be sales data. Having your vendors report their sales each week or each month kind of gives you a really straightforward look at how the market's performing. And then this can be used for getting grants, like our grant, or even if you're getting a grant for your market that says, if we implement this program, I think we're going to see an increase in sales. That's really useful for that. And then also for internal evaluation, just making decisions about, should we move locations? You know, this is the amount of people that we have now. Will being closer to a park be helpful, or, you know, moving downtown versus in a suburb or something like that. So that's really what you use that for. Does anyone have questions just on these terms? So I'm gonna be kind of referencing some of this. This is just my very quick, like, short overview of what data is and how to use it. And then I have a couple specific things, resources that you can use, and I'll make sure to link the ones that I don't have in the member portal there for you guys. And side note, you'll have access to the portal throughout the winter. We will clear it at the beginning of the next spring. So your login should work all winter if you're looking for something specific about any of the things that I shared in here. So in the resources section of the FARRMS portal, there is this section down here on surveys and data collection. And so these are kind of a range of, this first one is pretty academic. So it really gets into data collection, if that's what you're looking for. Maybe not the first one to jump into right away, but this kind of just talks about some of the research side of it. If you want to be, part of a grant or something like that, when you kind of need that higher level data. But some of this tools for rapid assessment, like this might be what is a little more easier to start out with if you are just kind of trying to look for how people are feeling about your market. Let me find. So yeah, they start with attendance counts, And this is some of the stuff we've gone over. Who do you count? When do you count? Different methods of counting. And then they talk a little bit about dot posters, which are a pretty quick and easy way for an event like a farmer's market where you have people moving through and they don't want to sit around and answer a bunch of questions. So I think this first photo kind of shows what it is. So you'd ask a question and they could range from like fun questions to get people involved, like what's your favorite vegetable? And then you give people these cheap stickers that you get from like Walmart or like a Staples or something. And they put the sticker on the one that they agree with. And then you can also answer or do questions like, how often do you come to the market? Every week, twice a month, like once a year. And then you just, give people the stickers as they walk by, they can answer the questions. So that's like a really quick and easy way to just kind of get a feel of your market, what people are thinking, that type of stuff. And this goes over methods for that. They also have a section here about doing sales data. This is helpful also too because the dot survey method is anonymous. So people might feel more comfortable just putting a sticker and it can't be traced back to them. And then it also has at the end kind of an example of how you might analyze the data to kind of get something meaningful out of it. So for example, they ask this question: to increase your spending, the market should offer more, and then they have these different options. And so if you can see, the top response was organic produce, and then cheese, and then prepared food, meat, and then poultry. So if you're recruiting vendors, that kind of gives you something to look for the next year, something that's important to your customers. And then again, this one is about like, would you shop in a downtown location? Or would you shop at during these hours as you're making decisions about, like Karen mentioned that the Thursday markets were not the best attended in the last couple weeks. So yeah, maybe do one of these, ask people what date they would prefer. But I also get sometimes you have to just choose a day and try it out and see how it goes. That one is linked there. I'm not going to go over the rest of these, but these are kind of more of like examples of people who did an in-depth analysis, and feel free to look at them if you have questions. I'm going to touch on the GEL resources again, because I think that these are a little bit more doable for a lot of markets. I think you guys have looked through these, but one thing I suggest when you're looking through these is to kind of make it your own. So a lot of these give you a structure and it's a great place to start, but you, for your market, are maybe going to want to do something a little bit different, but at least here you're not completely reinventing the wheel, because these aren't necessarily structured toward markets specifically. You know, they're public spaces, so that can mean a lot, but a lot of those same questions here. How often do you visit? How did you get here? A lot of these questions about like how your relationship to the area, what brings you there. And then a lot of these like sliding scales are really useful. In general, when you're asking people questions like this about their feelings, about their thoughts and their opinions, it's really good to give them a slider or an option like this, a scale, because it's a lot to walk up to someone and just say, explain to me your feelings about this place. A lot of times you're not going to get the type of answers that you want. So really giving them something, even though you might feel that you're reducing someone's answers down to this very specific question. That's sometimes you have to do that to make sure that you get enough data. And then this one is, a mix of it. What would make you feel more safe in this place? That's something that maybe it works best to just leave it open-ended. Maybe not everyone will have an answer for that. So giving someone the space to put in whatever they want. So just try to balance that and think about how long it would take someone to do this survey. When you give them options, they're much more likely to recognize their self, answer the question and move on, versus giving them an open-ended question where now they are standing in the middle of the market trying to think about answers to these questions that maybe weren't on their mind. I really like these resources and I suggest going back to them in the future because I think they give you a really good different perspective on evaluating your market. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second and ask if there is questions or comments before I move on. This document here, I linked in the intern portal for under today's lesson. So this is not in the resources. That's this one here, growing your market. It's under your homework, but it's not necessarily an assignment for you. It's just here for you to look through. Again, this one is a little bit of an in-depth look. So skim it and look at what is going to be most relevant to you. Okay, I'm going to find the section. So yeah, I mean, this talks a lot about strategic marketing and then getting the information that you need to make those decisions. So before you can make a marketing strategy, you have to know who you're targeting, who you are talking to, and who your audience is. And it also here, I like how it talks about reviewing your market's vision and your mission. So before, like when I was talking about what is your goal with this data, what are you trying to use it for? If your market has a vision statement or a mission statement, it's probably going to be centered around providing local nutritious food to people or about the economic stimulus of your community or supporting businesses and farmers or something similar to that. So as you're asking questions, maybe, for example, the age and gender tally was like one of the easiest ones to do, but is that going to inform your decisions about your market? Does knowing how many people of each gender attend your market, like, is that going to bring you closer to your mission and your vision? So just think about the questions that you're asking and the answers that you're hoping to get. Oh, I didn't even realize they had this in here. This is, I would say, a very handy thing is, yeah, a lot of these things I just talked about, affordable produce, neighborhood, is it a downtown? Does it have to do with creating a place for family or for sustainable agriculture or whatever your market really wants to focus on? Again, this is questions, things that you could look for or ask when you are thinking about ways to grow your market. And if you want to go through and do this activity, it walks you through it, but I'm not expecting you guys to do that. But it kind of prompts you and gives you questions all the way through. And if you would like to do that, feel free to. This part, I think, is also going to be helpful if you haven't had a background in analysis or data, just to kind of, some of this I went over, the types of data and what it means, but I'm not going to cover it too much. But if you do want to keep this or print it out and give it to your market absolutely do that. One of the things I didn't talk about is focus groups. I think these are going to be a lot more significant to your market if you are thinking about making a big change, because then you really want to make sure that you have your customers on board with your decision. So something like you're completely changing the time and location, and you are maybe, or you're combining your market with another market and you're going to kind of try and merge to be one market. That would be something that you maybe want to feel out specifically with people before you make a decision like that. I think that there's a lot of this. I'm going to find the section. Some of this gets a little specific. Since this is, most of your guys' work has been with advertising and communications, this section might be specifically interesting to you to kind of think about, not necessarily the data side of it, but how you could use that in your communications and reaching people and just kind of making a specific plan for your market using some of these methods. So again, it will go over some of this. It might be familiar to you, different types of media and the uses of them, flyers and handouts versus posters, versus postcards and mailing, signs, and then working with restaurants or like places to hang up your media or materials. Special events, Kaya talked about doing college day, or if your market is on a holiday or you have an anniversary of your market, 10 years or 50 years or a year, whatever your market is at. And some of these things we also talked about doing, and a lot of you have done throughout the years or throughout the season: raffles, music, games, market tours. I wonder what that means. You can read and find out. Okay, I'm not going to go through this one anymore. I think we have a pretty good feel of it. I am going to just go to some of this workbook sections that maybe you want to go specifically to this, just as something, as like a guided way to look through what goals and what activities you would like to increase for your market. Okay, I have one last thing, and I feel like I am just bombarding you guys with so much stuff about analysis, but one last resource that you guys can use, or you could pass on to your market to use in the future. This is a website called MarketShare that helps you with some of that analysis side of it. So they have already designed surveys and questions and things to kind of guide your analysis. But the trade-off is that you have to use this website to kind of get those results analyzed. So it's really nice if you don't know where to start and you just want to use some of these questions, but there's not really room for making it your own. But if you're looking for somewhere to start, they have these under the tools section. So if you are looking at measuring your market's economic impact, they have something specifically on that. And they will give you, so then they'll give you like specific questions to do. For this one, you can download the materials to do surveys. You do the surveys at your market, and then you come to this website, you put the data in, and then it will generate a report from your data. So you don't have to do any of the analysis. It does it all itself. I will maybe just pull up the questions. So this is how you enter the data. And that's just when I said, like, it's very specific. If you don't ask the questions in the way they want, then it can't really analyze it. But so the first question is, how often do you attend the market? And so then you would survey these people and then put their answers in. So this is your first person. I don't remember what all these are. How much did you spend? And I think this one is your zip code and their gender. I'll pull up the questions, but you would fill all of this in and then you save it and it generates a report for you. So these are the questions. How often do you visit the market? Is the market your primary reason for visiting this neighborhood? How much money did you spend today at the market? Do you have plans to spend money elsewhere in the area? How much money you've spent or you plan to spend at surrounding businesses? What is your zip code and what is your gender? So these are the questions that you would have to ask. But if you ask all of these questions in the way you want, and then you generate a report, there is an example. If I can find the example report. Well, I will email the report to you afterwards. But basically, it can tell you sales per square foot. So like if you are talking to someone and you're like, this is like people are spending more money here than anywhere else in town. And then you can also, it generates like how much of your money spent at the market stays in the local community. So like it uses the data you got from asking people how much money they spend at the market. And then if they're visiting other businesses, and it does math and tells you for every dollar spent at my market, $5 is circulated into the local community. And that way you don't have to do any of the math. And I'll email you guys an example report of this. So for doing things like that, this is really helpful for trying to get a grant or a sponsorship when you can really show the impact that your market has. But it is, I mean, there's trade-offs, you know, you have to do really specific, you have to use their method. And they have other ones as well that I won't necessarily go over, but I will put this in the portal. Okay, that's everything I have. How are you feeling with that, all that? Would this have been helpful if I did this in the beginning of the season, or would it have been, my fear is that it would be way too much for like week 2 when you guys are still like learning about your market and everything. Do you think you'll use this in the future?
I'd say 50-50 at this point because of how late it's getting in the season. I almost think this would have been good to have gone over like 4 or 5 weeks ago, probably.
Okay.
Like just after I arrived, admittedly, because for the most part, we would have been established with our markets. A good chunk of people would have known who we were, and we would have been able to gather more data.
Yeah.
At this point of the market, things are wrapping up. So now what's being sold starting to change. It's a lot more, at least for my market, it's a lot more pumpkins and squash instead that are going quickly instead of like cucumbers.
Mm-hmm.
But things have definitely changed as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was on the fence of like when I should put this in, because I know that it is too late to really implement it at your market, but I didn't want to overwhelm you at the beginning. So hopefully, like I said, I'll make sure that everything I went over is linked in the portal, and you can access that for at least through January, and then feel free to download, print, or save all of those resources so that you have them for the future and you can give them to your market or other public outdoor events that you're doing. Well, that's everything I have. If you do have questions on any of this, my background is in science, so if you have questions on data analysis, you can ask me anytime. So that's all I have for you today. I will see you guys next Monday for our very last learning session.